Hello, good morning, good afternoon from the territory of the Tsleil-Waututh First Nation, where I have the privilege of making my home and office a beautiful part of what is also known as North Vancouver. Thank you so much for joining us today. The race to net zero is on. Canada has tabled legislation to join governments and companies around the world in committing to a goal of carbon neutrality by 2050. The record heat here in BC and across Canada is a reminder that the climate crisis isn't far off or intangible. It's real, it's urgent, and it's happening now. At the same time, we know that more than half of Canada's current emissions are produced by oil, gas, and transportation, meaning there is no way we can achieve this ambitious 2050 target without energy system transformation. As the new president and country chair of Shell Canada, Susannah Pierce works at the heart of this transformation. She joins me today to discuss what a net zero future means for Shell. Welcome, Susannah. Thanks for joining me. I'm Elizabeth Shirt, Managing Director, Globe Series.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me. And I'm actually calling in myself from the traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh here in Vancouver. So wonderful to be next door.
Fantastic. Yeah, we're just down the road from one another. Susannah, first of all, I want to congratulate you on becoming the new president and country chair of Shell Canada. And I wanted to start by just asking if you could share your vision for this position and just talk a little bit about what will be your first priorities in the role.
The vision for the role. Well, it was first a privilege to be considered to do this job because it is such a pivotal time for the energy sector. And if I had to choose a company to be in a leadership position with, it would be Shell, because I think Shell is really, truly, genuinely trying to tackle this challenge. And as one of the major energy companies in the world, I think it has the wherewithal to make significant changes. And I've asked myself a number of times, do I want to be outside trying to influence change, or do I want to be inside trying to influence change? And being inside influencing change, I think, is where we can have the greater impact. And I think I've seen it just in the first couple of months that I've been on seat, the level of activity that we have in trying to transition our company from one that had traditionally produced oil and gas into one which is a leader in new technologies and new energy systems that can achieve the net zero ambition. So for me, my vision really is to help with that transition, to accelerate it as much as I can, to enable the company also to have a renewed relationship with communities, with Indigenous communities, with partners, because partners are critical, I think, to the delivery of the energy transition. And then finally, the other piece that I think sometimes gets lost as we talk about how do we really get to net zero is customers. Because if we even consider Shell's own footprint, scope 1, 2, and 3, most of the emissions are at the end user, at the consumer level. So we will not be able to get to net zero. We will not be able to get to the Paris Agreement goals without customers, coming along with us. So that's got to be a critical focus of mine as well.
Awesome. Yeah, that customer piece is so important to getting where we need to go. Susannah, Royal Dutch Shell recently announced it will accelerate emissions reduction plans in response to a court order in the Netherlands. How is this going to affect Canadian operations? How are you going to ensure that your plans are ambitious enough to respond?
Yeah, it's a great question, because the decision that came out of the district court in The Hague was a bit of a surprise, in that we were surprised that one company would be targeted to achieve and accelerate its transition to net zero, because, as I just said, it takes more than one company. It takes an entire ecosystem to achieve our climate ambitions. And so we were surprised by the decision, which was to accelerate our transition to net zero, to reduce our emissions by 45% by 2030. It's ambitious. And, our reaction to that is, okay, what more can we do? And so it renews our effort, I think. It increases, I think, our ambition to do more and to work with others to do more. And others, like I said, our customers, our governments, are all the stakeholders and partners along the way that can help us do that. So if anything, the decision really helps us realize that we cannot do this alone, that we've got to work together with all of those parties. And as I said at the beginning, I think the other key thing is bringing society with us too. A key part for me is helping people realize the benefits of the energy system we're creating. And so that is the partnership, that is the relationship we have with communities and governments as well.
Absolutely a challenge on a global scale, Susannah, and to reach that net zero emissions by 2050 ambition at the global level. We've heard the latest International Energy Agency report recommending no new oil and gas developments. You already talked about, oil development having been at the heart of Shell's history, and it is a part of the current business model. And you've made this tremendous net zero by 2050 commitment. How do you reconcile that IEA report with your climate targets, and what can Canadians, those consumers, expect from Shell in the next almost 3 decades?
Yeah, the IEA report, just like Shell scenarios, is a pathway to net zero. And so, as any pathway or any scenarios would have you'll have different inputs and different variables which will lead to a particular outcome. So the IEA report has various, variables and inputs to lead to that specific outcome, as does Shell's own strategy, which actually already includes the fact that we are transitioning from oil and gas, that we've reached peak oil in 2019, that we will cease new frontier exploration by 2025. And I just want to make a comment on that one too, because new frontier exploration does not mean that we continue to produce from perhaps even more carbon intensive barrels. It allows us to get to the best barrels. It allows us to find the lowest carbon, the most productive barrels. So again, as we've already made these commitments, of course, we're going to continue to look at how we're progressing against our overall net zero commitment as we move forward. But there's a lot of consistency there. And as I said, if you look at what goes in and what comes out, you can see that there are multiple pathways to net zero. The IEA's produced one, and we still have one as well.
So exciting times, Susannah, because you're not alone as a major corporation making a net zero commitment. Many major corporations are doing the same, setting net zero targets, but don't necessarily have the clear plans in place to achieve them. Is this greenwashing in your mind? Should companies lead with that ambition, or the strategy and the plans? What comes first?
Well, I would be hesitant to say that you should put a goal out there if you have absolutely no intention or plan of getting there, especially because, I've always been a bit of a proponent of setting targets and making them public, simply because then you're held accountable publicly. So I support that. I think the other thing which Shell has done, which again, I think is a good thing to do, is it was the first energy company to say that they're actually going to go for a board vote or a shareholder vote for its energy transition strategy, and then be held accountable for that transition strategy and progress every year, and provide an update to shareholders every 3 years. So you can see that we are not only setting the goal, we're actually setting the stage gates and the milestones to be held accountable. Other companies will have other plans and other methods of achieving their net zero commitments. And, and I think it's up for each one of us, or investors, communities, what have you, to comment on them, to look at them, and to hold those companies accountable. But what I have seen, which I think speaks to the fact that we are in a new space in terms of collaboration, is the level of joint partnership that we're seeing in achieving a net zero commitment. So you'll see companies like ours partner with Rolls-Royce to create sustainable aviation fuels. You'll see companies like ours partner with Amazon to provide renewable power, because we also share climate ambitions and climate goals. You'll see us partnering with Microsoft similarly to try and jointly achieve our climate goals. So I think greenwashing is really going to be determined by how successful each company is in achieving the goals they set forth. And I think that the jury can still be out. But I think from the Shell perspective, what we have done is set those times for those juries to take a look at how we're doing. And I think that's even better process of addressing the concern of greenwashing.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Susannah. You talked about that it takes a village, it takes collaboration, it takes partnerships. And when we've talked about that this transformation is going to affect all segments of the economy. As we make that transition, how do we ensure that workers, have access to the reskilling and upskilling programs that they're going to need to continue to be part of that clean economy? How do we make sure that no one's left behind?
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic question, because we can't ignore the fact that this will have impact on real jobs, on real people, on families. And just witness the stress that has happened to families over COVID-19, in various sectors where you can't go to work and you don't know where you're going to get money to feed your kids, to pay for clothes, to do the things you used to do. So there's going to be some real dislocations if we are not on our front foot. I was pleased to see that in this year's federal budget, there were some funds allocated for transition. And I think that's going to be critical because the types of skills, for example, that you have today at a refinery, while they might be applicable to a certain extent, you're still going to have some new skills and development, particularly as you look at the digital transformation that's also happening along with the energy transformation. So for me, I think it's looking forward, saying, what are those jobs of the future? Because the number of jobs that we have right now, for example, at a gas plant, are not the same number of jobs we're going to have at a solar facility or a wind farm. What are the skills we need for the different types of jobs that we will still need? And how do we create that roadmap, that blueprint, not only just serving ourselves, but in partnership with communities, with Indigenous communities that have already been benefiting from these operations in their territories, with academic institutions, with universities, with governments. We have to kind of all see the same roadmap to an extent to really be successful in it, so that we can also help influence the kids that are coming behind us. Because training kids today for jobs that won't be here when they get out of school doesn't make any sense. So I'm a big proponent of looking forward, of working in collaborative fashion with all of those involved so that we can create the right sort of blueprint for those future jobs.
Let's pull that thread a little further, Susannah, because in this transition, we also have opportunities to include groups that have historically not necessarily been a part of the energy sector. I'm thinking of women, people of color. How is Shell looking at that opportunity?
Yeah, I think, well, from the gender point of view, indeed, we've made a very deliberate effort to increase the number of women in leadership positions. I'm probably a product of that myself. And I also have a very keen eye on what are we really doing to ensure women are in leadership positions, that there's equity, but then also as it relates to BIPOC, to Black and Indigenous and people of color, let's really make sure that our baseline, where are we today, is transparent so we know where we need to get to. Because my ambition is such that our company represents a society in which we operate. And that's across the board. That's inside the house and that's outside the house. So how are we working with our suppliers? How are we working to develop businesses in the communities where we operate so they can benefit from the work that we're doing? So there's a lot of focus that I have, and granted, I'm still just a couple of months in, but looking at today, and then what is that, again, another roadmap towards where we want to be. But it has to start with the data of where we are and collecting that, and then establishing a plan, working with the businesses in Canada to get there. So we've got a lot more work to do. What I'm happy about, though, is we've seen some progress and we've seen a commitment to get there. And I think, over this last year, last 18 months, we've seen multiple transitions. We've seen new transparency in a way we never have. So again, the influence of society is also having influence inside the corporation about how do we address some of these issues. And I want to be right at the center of that.
Awesome. Susannah, we've reached the fun part of the interview, the rapid fire round. So are you ready?
I think so.
Okay. First answer comes to mind. What book is on your nightstand?
Okay, so I have a couple, but the first one is Mark Carney's Values. And I will tell you, I've cracked it, I've started it, and it's a good thick book. But, Mark Carney obviously is a thought leader, a very respected individual. And I'm glad to see his book written and published. And I believe in the fact that we need to reevaluate values. And so I think it's a very important book to read. I've actually shared it with a number of folks on my team. The other one that I have is a book by Bob Roth, and it's about transcendental meditation. So I've been doing transcendental meditation for some time now. And again, I think it's another way of allowing me personally to see the world differently in a place of calm and of peace. And so that's another book I have on my desktop or on my bedside table. One more, and that is by Katie Bear, and it's a book of poetry. And it's a book of My Kind of Women. I can't remember the exact title, but it's an awesome book, especially for mothers. I'm a single mom, and so it's a good book for us to feel empowered and then also to empower our daughters. So it's a highly recommended one too.
Awesome. So another way to look inside your what motivates you. What is your favorite motivational quote?
I have a bunch, but Eleanor Roosevelt, which is, you must do the things you think you cannot do. And I apply it to my life. I apply it to my kids' life. And I think, frankly, we can apply it to, the companies in which we work as well.
Love it. Susannah, what's the proudest accomplishment of your career?
The proudest accomplishment of my career is actually the decision I made probably about 8 or 9 years ago to leave a job, which I actually happened to have at Shell, to come back to Canada for my 2 kids. And so I was a single mom over in The Hague doing big job. And I realized that I couldn't be a good mom and a good worker unless I had the right balance. So I made the decision to come back to Canada. And that was the proudest moment, I think, partly because I had to come to terms with my own professional ambition and the needs of my family. And I made the right choice.
Amazing. Okay, tough one. Describe the future of energy in one word.
Inclusive.
Love it. Awesome. On that note, Susannah, thank you so much for joining us. It's been such a pleasure. Love what we've heard in terms of what it takes to reach that net zero target. We need ambition, we need action, we need accountability, and more than anything, we got to work together. It takes a village, it takes collaboration. I'm so excited to see where this journey takes Shell and the next steps with you at the helm here in Canada. So thanks again for joining me today. For more on the race to net zero, including our Destination Net Zero event series at Globe, you can check out www.globeseries.com. Our first event is the Energy and Transportation Days that will be held September 28th and 29th of this year. We hope to see you there. Susannah, thanks again. And thanks to all of you for tuning in.